It is these moments in the day when I get to come inside and reflect more deeply on what I'm actually doing, what's driving my activity. What's at the heart of every act I perform? Is it to take or to share? Science demonstrates that energy flows from areas of high pressure, fullness, to where there's low pressure or empty. If I am empty, then I will definitely take, as I go through the day, every act in some quiet, hidden way, will have the intention to take. And that will create dependency, expectation, fragility of spirit. But if I go through the day full, simply expressing, sharing, no interest in a return, not demanding or expecting, free of conditions, that feels like a strength of character, integrity. So what is that fullness of spirit? A full heart? What is it I am taking or giving? It's value, quality, worth. To be filled with a sense of my own value, completely at peace with myself. Not based on anything external, not on how the body looks or what I have or who I know or how I am positioned relative to others. None of that. Just my intrinsic worth. I am valuable for absolutely no reason other than it's who I am. The intrinsic value of me, the soul, filled with that experience, and the heart, then what will drive my activity as I go through the day? Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. Tonight's session is the heart of self-worth. So I find that to be a very interesting topic. And if you would like to perhaps maybe share your thoughts in terms of, you're talking about the core of where self-worth stems from. And that is interesting in terms of the lens of Raja Yoga versus the lens of how we see things in day-to-day life.
Om Shanti. So I think it's interesting to look at when one in the body is experiencing pain or illness. We like to diagnose it first and then give a prescription. And I guess that's what Raj Yoga tries to do spiritually. Diagnose what the problem is, and then that would determine the prescription, what I need to do. And everyone's got their own ideas of what the cause of sorrow or distress or anxiety is. But what Raj Yoga suggests is that it's a spiritual problem. So that's the first thing, is that I'm not going to look outside or at the body or any of the physical things for a solution, but look at the state of the self. And this is really sorrow, is the pain we're addressing. And so then we start to explore what's causing that sorrow, what's causing that distress, and perhaps that suggesting it is a sign of disease or illness. It's not our healthy state. And if it is something internal, then that means that there's something inside that's off or lacking or deficient or not firing properly. And when we look honestly and clearly at what we're trying to get as a solution outside, over and over, it seems to be this fulfillment at a very deep level of our own value. You know, it's quite fascinating. The thing that we're most reactive about is if in any way we feel our image is threatened or there's loss. So Raj Yoga really just goes to the heart of the problem and attempting to bring back that value of the self.
When you were sharing, I was thinking about perhaps maybe it's in the realm, the context of Raj Yoga, and maybe it's a phrase that's meaningful for those in Raj Yoga, but we often share about this, and we have in different sessions in the interview. And I've heard you've actually share it in the Foundations course, is that if I focus on purity, then I can get my self-worth back. What does that mean?
Does sound vague, doesn't it? So there seems to be a connection between truth and purity. In physical terms, when we are truing something, it means that we are aligning it. And so what is the alignment or true state of the self? And it's connected to what is eternal, actually, not transient. So when I connect to what is eternal, I'm able to let go of what is not. And that letting go is very purifying. It's very much a relief for the heart to not have to hold on anymore to things that really don't belong to me. I think we're all very desperate to let go, but don't know how. So the truth really frees me to let go of that which really isn't connected to me. And that's a very purifying experience. And of course, allows me to connect to what is truly mine, what is eternal. So the method of becoming pure, this connection to truth, is aligning me, and that's really going to lead to, as it would physically, well-being that I'm seeking for. So I want a very pure sense of self, remove the bits that are not me.
We had a conversation the other day about self-worth. And it might seem very simple, just follow instructions. But I remember you were sharing that self-worth is probably the biggest thing I would say humanity is faced with. But just even students of Raja Yoga, what is it that's preventing us? We say, we had a recent conversation, like it shouldn't be very simple, we're given all the same instructions. Is it perhaps maybe our ideas of what purity is, our ideas of what the solution is, and we think that we're following the instructions?
I suspect that everyone wants to do this and can recognize that it's important, but to acknowledge that there is a lot of resistance to what we're trying to do. And one of the top things that resistance tries to create is a lot of distraction and a bit of sloppiness or carelessness in following the directions. So I want to, but there's this constant opposing force. And the opposing force is obviously a lack of self-worth. So it's fascinating that we're very attached, or become so attached to that absence of self-worth, which some call arrogance or ego. And it really fights tooth and nail to stay alive. So we're not really focusing as deeply as perhaps we need to on what cultivates that self-worth, the experience of the truth, really going into the truth, because it's so threatening to the old guard that it really resists and distracts and puts up obstructions.
When you're sharing, I've never had a chance to physically experience it, but I've been watching those who are wall climbing. And when they get to, they have this belay, so that's what you call it, but they're hooked onto a harness. And when they're actually, in a safety zone with this harness. By the time they climb to the top, the instructor tells them, okay, I want you to let go, because there's someone down on the belayer who's actually helping to make sure that when they let go, it's going to be a smooth journey coming down with this harness and rope. But from what I hear and see, it's terrifying to let go. And I was wondering if that is, in a sense, a physical parallel to what is happening when we're trying to let go, or we're trying not to let ego fire, but it just keeps firing.
The way it's presented in Raj Yoga is that letting go feels as threatening as dying, which is about as extreme as things can get. It feels that threatening, and we've used the term ego death. So yes, it's quite terrifying to the soul. If I haven't really, we use the word faith, but recognized it isn't a loss. This is what I'm going to get. And it's very, very genuine. The feeling that I am going to attain this through letting go, that needs to kind of be so clear in the heart emotionally to be able to let go.
Excuse me. I know you've mentioned timing is it's important, but sometimes maybe when I think of timing, I think of then it feels like a hit or miss. If I'm extremely disinterested, then suddenly I let go. And then how about next time? Like, shouldn't there be some sort of accuracy to this?
Perhaps. So, I mean, that would be nice. When it was, it's been talked about that the only ones really that were accurate in the way you're talking about were the original students of Raj Yoga from the, they seem to have really been full on complete recognition, and there was just constant progress. There wasn't all this fluctuation or hit and miss. So sometimes the feeling that I need to take care of that recognition, again, aware the opposition is constantly lurking. And it can really, I can see very clearly in one moment, and the next moment, it's not so clear. And we behave according to how we see or understand. So constantly taking care of what we call this third eye of recognition, that which can recognize what is invisible or eternal, really have to take care of it. That's one of the reasons we do daily study, is it kind of brings us out of amnesia. It brings us back into focus, and the encouragement, never miss that, never miss. It's almost as if we may not be fully aware of how profound the opposing forces are. We might take it quite lightly. So we really have to take care of our recognition, or to keep, so it's not just sort of hit and miss.
Thinking of three parallels of examples in terms of carelessness, and what is it on a spiritual level what is needed to override. I was thinking, okay, maybe let's just keep it to a couple, but when doctors prescribe antibiotics, they actually say you should take it for the full entire time. They say, it's usually I think like 5 days or a course of 7 days. And they say, even though your symptoms are getting better, you must keep taking them. And there are many, from what I hear, is like, oh no, the symptoms are gone, so we stop. And I know that you've also shared that the physiotherapists, said, you have this injury and you're going to like rest, or you're going to do this and you're going to feel better. And then you're going to want to get back. And he says, don't do that. But I was thinking about what, spiritually speaking, there's one thing about seeing it, or is it that we may not see it and not being able to override? I'm not sure what is causing it. Is it comfort zone? Is it distraction? Maybe temporary fulfillments, that then we end up having to experience the ramifications of, having lost some sense of insight at that time.
Yes, I suppose it might be possible that we don't fully understand or see it. One example that comes to my mind is sometimes when we're dreaming, and in the dream, we're positive that we've woken up, but in fact, becomes clear soon enough as something strange happens that we haven't. So then we go a little further along in the dream, and once again, I'm positive I've woken up. But again, and I actually had this when I first came into the study, I was experiencing this phenomena quite a bit. At night, I'd be dreaming, and literally every night it would seem I'd have this kind of thing happening so I started to create a method in my dream so that I knew whether I was awake or not. And the method was, go and find a light somewhere in the dream, go and find a lamp or a light switch, go and turn it on. If it doesn't turn on, it means you're still asleep. I know this sounds strange, but it was really in the dream so convincing. I'm awake. And I say, well, let's just check, there might be a lamp or something around, go to switch it on. It wouldn't switch on. And I knew I'm still asleep. And it was very interesting because it really felt like I was awake. So I sort of had this thing. So in the spiritual study, we also get signs or signals of whether or not we have understood, whether or not we've seen. And those are so helpful. They're not meant to make us feel bad. They're meant to give us, just like in the dream, this is really good feedback. Now I know where I'm at and what I need to work a little bit more to wake up. So the signs and signals are very helpful. But again, because we may not be feeling worthy, we might just feel that they are criticism or judgment.
I know you were using an example that, these signs and drama is not a bad thing. You're trying to tell it to somebody who has self-worth issues, that to internalize that. And because in a dream, well, that's still fascinating that you were lucid in that dream. So just so you know, that example is kind of probably rare, or unless I'm assuming. But the reason why I was thinking about it, if it's an accumulation of purity, an accumulation of the experience of truth, because I'm in a situation where perceived, of course, it's ego. I'm in this, service project. And it feels like the dynamics are a little strange. And I don't think individuals in there are really having really much of acknowledgement of each other or regard. So I'm watching the ego come up. But today, the experience of being a soul was such that it actually starts to feel very entertaining. Like it actually feels like whatever it is that souls are, however they're behaving, it's, I don't know, I'm not letting it just doesn't affect me. Maybe because the experience of being a soul is very different. Like there's a feeling of value, and I actually feel entertained. I'm quite surprised by that.
Again, it's so helpful to know there's a connection between truth and purity. So when I say I'm a soul, it's a very high level of detachment or detached observer, where I'm quite, it's the example we use is an actor in a play that I suddenly am aware this is all a play, everyone's fine, it's all a play. And so I'm looking at it with that kind of lightness or entertaining, like easiness. It's not, there's a bigger reality, if you will, off stage. So the truth really creates, we call it alone, floating alone of purity. It creates a purity. So now I'm able to have responses and thoughts and feelings and attitudes that are more driven by my true state, which is very light and benevolent. And that's a very pure way to operate. So I'm accumulating more and more purity. It's quite critical to be able to use the truth in order to fortify a pure state.
That is a lens, a reframing that we use in Raja Yoga. It's a play. We're all actors on the stage. But what do you think comes first? Like a very deep, truthful experience of being a soul, or just remind myself I'm an actor, it's a play?
I think it's more that there's two different levels. One is a limited application of truth, and the other is unlimited. So I can still think I'm the body and be thinking it's a play, and it will have some results to a point. If I'm crashing in a plane, it may not be enough, but it will have some results to a point. Or as a soul, I can use this. So we say, listen to spiritual knowledge in soul consciousness, use it in soul consciousness. So as a soul, it's just so natural to say, okay, these are souls. We've all forgotten completely what's going on, but it's a play, everyone's fine. So that it doesn't really matter how extreme, because sometimes we say, yeah, that's okay, but in this situation, it's just too extreme, And what soul consciousness is saying is there is no too extreme. There's nothing that's too extreme. Everything that's going on in the physical realm is this play. We're just actors in a play. But I want to be in that very, very detached, non-physical state as I'm using this knowledge. That's going to have very, very different results.
What was your experience when you learned, okay, it's a play? Was it sort of like, oh, I recognize that, but I need to feel a very meaningful experience of being a soul? Because I knew a soul quite young at the time. She was about maybe 14 or so in the body. And she said that she had no knowledge of soul consciousness, and she was actually quite disconnected with, things. And she said, "This just feels like we're all actors," but she was very unhappy. And the reason I'm asking about your experience is, are all the students varying in terms of maybe resonating with a piece of knowledge that's in the study, but again, where am I at in terms of soul consciousness?
Yes, I think, the feeling again, these tools feel very different when used in the hands of soul consciousness. So we have this formula we've been playing with lately, which is to know or to hear, to accept, and to move along according to. And so I can know and recognize that this feels true, this feels right, but it's only as a soul that I'm really able to accept it as a reality and allow it to reshape my heart. That is my feelings. And then it's very natural because my heart has been transformed how I feel. I will move along differently. So if it's not, the pure state creates my pure nature, which is benevolent, very peaceful. If that isn't happening, it's again loyal feedback that somewhere in there I'm not quite following the directions. We always get along the way, again, let me explain. Consider yourself to be a soul. And, we sort of go, yeah, okay, but it's really like these directions are not going to work unless you consider yourself to be a soul while using them. They're the first directions. So that can make a huge difference.
It seems like, though, it can still be quite tricky. I remember you have shared that, it's true that you can think your way into an experience and it's still not the real thing. What is that then? A timing thing for one to be able to discern that? So I was thinking about physical fitness and talking about functional fitness. There's such a thing as functional medicine, functional movement. To be able to assess oneself properly, is this kind of exercise that I'm doing, or is this the way that I'm holding posture or alignment of the body, such that I can actually transfer that in movement? And does it take only like a certain way, a certain individual, or can one train oneself to be able to assess properly and diagnose that?
I think ultimately even timing comes under the umbrella of the type of soul. Everyone's got a different part, and acting, they talk about some having better timing than others, and that just depends on the actor. So also as souls, we're each unique, there's variety. So what each one craves for or finds interesting or satisfying is very different. And some are very, very pulled to quality, to a certain kind of experience. I only say this because you see it in fitness as well. There is an absolute when it comes to biomechanics or movement of the body. It's not my opinion or your opinion. Yes, there's injuries and stuff, but there's certain things that are absolute in terms of use of the body. And they are based on actually very deep things, the core stability being one of them. So some are very pulled. I was in a training session today, and it was just so funny because this soul has the capacity to do things very beautifully aligned. But again, because of the worth issue, whenever they're in a group setting, this other thing takes over of trying to just prove or show, which means they start to throw alignment out the window and just see if they can have bigger, bolder movement. And I find it fascinating because when we're alone, very nice alignment. In the class, totally falls apart. We've talked about it. They know it. But today it was so interesting because their alignment was great, but that little unworthiness just is so they'd be doing something and then they'd poke their chin. Every time they did it, they do a push-up, poke their chin. They did anything, poke their like. What's with that's all I was saying was don't poke your chin. So I was like, are you trying to go an extra mile? Is that quantity thing so strong that you just like this is? It was just so weird, right? So you can feel the battle. The soul is somewhat interested in alignment, but the deep, deep, deep for all of us is their deep desire to be valued is just keeps taking over. So when will the scale tip? I don't know. They've had difficulty with the body, and still takes a lot to shut down that craving to feel worthy. But I just noticed that in everything in life, we say everyone's got their own standards, and it just is unique for each soul.
Well, we are way over time, but we will have a part 2 because I'd like to explore, the relationship with Supreme Soul with respect to self-worth. So thank you for those for joining. We'll have a little short reflection.
Deep inside every single human soul, there is this very pure desire to be valued, to be at peace with the self, to respect the self. And even though that pure desire is inside, connected to the self, we might each go outside, away from the self, to try to fulfill it. That creates dependency, even anxiety, expectations, demands, sometimes conflict. But like mining for diamonds, let me try going inside now. Deep inside the self with a very simple lens, not looking around, very focused on mining underground in the depths of the self, the very heart of the self. And when I'm very quiet, very open, I can begin to hear the heartbeat of my own worth. That I am an eternal being, life itself. And my true state is very elevated, very dignified. Other voices might intercede to strip that belief and faith in the self. But in this moment, I don't listen to those voices. I just focus on this diamond awareness of the self, the tiny spark of faith that I am of intrinsic value, just being as a soul. So much beauty concentrated within the self. And in this moment, I am actually remembering myself. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for being present with us this evening. We wanted to let souls know that the English evening meditation online, we'll call it Insperience, It is now being offered every evening except Tuesdays because of the interview. So 6:30 to 7:30, we have an English workshop at the Inner Peace Center. I believe it's only on site. It's on September 25th, which I believe is a Sunday. I believe it's 12 o'clock to 3:30. Registration is through Eventbrite or through the center's website. Lots of other drop-in sessions on site as well as online. So please visit the center's website or Eventbrite. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.